Hello and welcome to the latest segment of A-State Sports Take. I'm Brady Michael, and I'm joined by my guests, Tristan Harlan and Jacob Wazinski. And our topic for this segment is which team outside of the top four of the most recent college football playoff has the best shot at making the top four. Now, gentlemen, a lot has happened since the rankings have come out. We've had Michigan-Ohio State. The game has taken place, and we saw Alabama about as close to a loss as you're ever going to see this season. And I think we need to start with that Michigan-Ohio State game because the loser of that one, obviously, Ohio State took the loss 30-24. What do you think that's going to have an effect on in the top four? Do you think that Ohio State is done?
At this point, yes. I mean, they have to be, right? They can't, compete in their conference championship. If they
Right.
do, I mean, at that point, then yeah, they're in. But with how the Big Ten is structured, makes it impossible, I think, for Ohio State to get in. At least in my opinion.
Yeah, and I like what he was saying about making it impossible to get in. But the fact of the matter is this: is when all the dust settles, I mean, you really got to look at it between that was probably the two highest ranked teams that are going to go head to head this season, and you may see a thing where what if Georgia loses in the SEC championship? Does that propel a one-loss Ohio State over an undefeated Oregon or maybe even undefeated Washington, depending on how that championship game goes?
Yeah, and watching the game live, Gus Johnson was like, this is the first playoff game of the season, and that's really what it turned out to be. And the thing that I look at is that there's so many teams right behind them that can win their conference championship to where, like you said, not competing for that Big Ten title is going to play a vital role. And speaking on maybe Alabama beating Georgia, that's a little bit of a talking point there. Alabama struggling to put Auburn away, and then a miracle in Jordan Hare, at least in their favor this time around, that, what was it, 4th and 31 from
Sounds about right.
It was 4th and goal from the 31. Got that past one-on-one left corner of the end zone, and then all madness ensued right after that. Does Alabama have what it takes to beat Georgia if they can just get up for that game? I mean, they'll get up for the game. It's just, can they put that performance behind them?
They can try to. I mean, they can certainly try to. But, I mean, if you're looking at the whole season in general, I mean, they struggled against USF. I mean, they lost pretty badly to Texas. I mean, but they've been rolling recently, but that Georgia defense, at least for me, is just way too, daunted and way too good to, have Milroe run around all day. I mean, that's kind of his whole strength. He's like, Jaden Daniels, but with less of an arm, at least, from what we've seen. And that 4th and goal probably showed otherwise. But I think when you look at Alabama, they could. I mean, there's a possibility, but it's a slim chance that they do. I mean, Georgia is still a powerhouse.
So this is arguably the most inconsistent Alabama team that we've seen in the Nick Saban era.
I would probably agree with
and
that.
I don't know if Nick Saban's contract with the devil himself ran out and he had to re-up it for another season.
No, it just got re-signed.
But that win against Auburn pretty much proves my point. But the fact is with this Alabama team, I don't think there really is a strong argument if they do go to Atlanta and they do beat Georgia and they do upset the defending national champions. I don't think there is a strong enough case based on their schedule outside of beating arguably one of the most talented LSU teams that we've seen since the Joe Burrow era.
Yeah, offensively.
I don't think that there's going to be a strong enough case with how their schedule looked, especially about almost losing, struggling against USF, like Jacob was mentioning. I don't think there's that case to make for them to sneak in at that 4th spot.
Yeah, and it's a totally different team that we've seen since that really nitpicky game against USF and the Texas loss. But I look at their offense, and I don't really see anything that can go in and face off against Georgia and actually put up enough points to beat them, because Georgia's offense has been coming along. They have Brock Bowers back. Yeah. And you look at Alabama's offense outside of Milroe, I mean, what's the strong suits that they have? It's not the same stars across the board that they had. They have Jermaine Burton, and he's their lead number 1 receiver, but that doesn't compare to the Julio Joneses and the Jalen Waddles, Devontae Smiths of the world. It's just going to be interesting to see if their young offensive line can also hold up, because if they end up winning against Georgia, because I don't think it's out of the question, we have to consider that, do they vault a Texas team that wins their conference?
No, not at all. I think with Texas, with how they've been playing recently, how their one-score games, I mean, if you're talking about the eye test, then Texas doesn't get in. You're talking about even the scheduling, Texas doesn't get in. I think, Alabama, if they beat, yes, they have that head-to-head, but I still think that Alabama's had a better win, and their better performances against top 25 opponents. I mean, the SEC is a whole different animal compared to the Big 12, who second is Oklahoma, who's had a couple awful losses the last couple of weeks. So I think again the head-to-head, yes, that should matter, but I think Alabama easily vaunts Texas. I guess depending on that Big 12 championship, but if Alabama wins, I think they do vaunt.
I want to make a point in there real quick is that I think Texas got the short end because Oklahoma, there's no rematch there. They have to face Oklahoma State since they got away from BYU, and Oklahoma obviously loses the tiebreaker since they lost to Oklahoma State. Getting that second shot against Oklahoma would have been vital for them because, that's the second best team in the conference, and now they don't get that.
Right. And really, you're looking at it, and you bring up the Texas-Alabama argument. But let's talk about Georgia for a second. Georgia's number one. They're undefeated. What more can you say about that team? But I will go on record as saying that this Georgia team is arguably the weakest that Kirby Smart has had in his entire run at Georgia.
Oh, really?
They just don't look that strong. Yes, they have 11 wins. Don't get me wrong. You can't discredit wins. But on the amount of the opponent scoring and how they're supposed to be the best team in college football, I just don't see it.
I want to have to get in here. You mean during his national championship?
Yeah, right. Yeah, right.
Okay.
Right.
I was about to say, I know he went 7-5.
No. I mean the national championships when he's winning a bunch. Sorry, I should have clarified.
Yeah, no, I completely get that. And the injuries that they've had definitely playing a big factor in that. I was a big fan of Branson Robinson, the running back, before he got hurt. His arms are like that big around. He's an insane guy. But, they still have the offensive firepower. It's just they don't really have the offensive scheme to do it. They lost their offensive coordinator to the Buccaneers, and the name's not in my head. But I think that their defense is also a step down. But even then, I don't think there's a team that's better than them at this current stage. Now, we'll see that. It's just because there's so many other teams that have been put on the ice. And let's kind of go down the list a little bit here. Since we, I guess, as a whole think Ohio State doesn't have a great shot at making it, they'll probably be the first team out. You look at Washington, they have to take care of business against, I believe it is Oregon in the Pac-12 championship game.
Yeah.
And so what a heck of a rematch that is, and maybe a battle for the Heisman Trophy as well.
No.
Much to your dismay. What do you think's going to go down in that game? We get to see that one earliest on Friday night.
Again, I think it's Bo Nix. Bo Nix is just a game changer, and he's kind of vaulted into that game changer role. I think for me, Oregon, kind of gets revenge. It's a story that journalists love, right? Of a team going in and getting rematched in a conference championship and ruining Washington's season. But I think Oregon, just with how complete they are, kind of easily goes past Washington.
I think we've seen this story time and time again for the Oregon Ducks, whether it's in football or even if it's in baseball against their in-state rival. I think Washington's really going to come out here and they're going to have all guns blazing, and I think they're going to upset Oregon. I just want to put that out there. I think Washington's going to upset Oregon, but I don't think this game's going to be the battle for the Heisman. I think it's going to be battle for second place in the Heisman voting.
Okay. We can save that for a different debate if you like.
Yes.
Okay. But let's say, for the sake of argument, that Georgia takes care of Alabama in the SEC championship. They're the 1 seed, undoubtedly. You look at Michigan, they take care of business. If they lose to Iowa,
we got bigger problems.
The gates of hell are going to open up.
Yeah.
You look at Washington. I think the winner, actually just the Pac-12 championship in general, the winner of that one gets in. Would you all agree?
100%.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, especially Washington. They would finish undefeated. And that leaves one more spot. And that is a Florida State team with an injured Jordan Travis. He's out for the year, maybe done for his career even, or Texas. And so how do you think that might unfold?
I'm already going to answer it with just a hand gesture.
I
I think Florida State sneaks in if they finish undefeated.
If they finish undefeated, right? That's a big if. Like we said, against Florida, against a pretty bad Florida team, right? Tate Rodemaker didn't do very well. You were carried by your rushing game at that point by Trey Benson.
Yeah, Trey Benson, one of the best running backs.
Absolutely. And Lawrence Toafili is one of the best scat backs in the country as well. I think, and wide receivers, Keon Coleman and Johnny Wilson. I think you look at Florida State, I think, again, if you look at the eye test with the game against Florida, and if they barely beat Louisville, then I think they do get in. But if they lose, then that's just, at that point, that's Texas in. That has to be Texas in.
Yeah, I'm not saying Louisville can give them a shot. I think Louisville might have been looking ahead to that ACC title game, and that's why Kentucky bit them. Yeah. Maybe they're playing the cards right so they can get overlooked a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. You never know. I mean, with ACC championship games, it's always a toss-up, so you just never know.
Yep. So what's y'all's final verdict for that fourth team that slips in there after conference championship week?
I have Florida State. I think
I can't go against the Seminoles at that point.
Yeah. Well, I'm in that boat too, so we'll rock out together. But that's all the time that we have for this segment today. Thank you to my guests, Tristan Harlan and Jacob Wazinski, and we'll catch you guys on the next edition of the A-State Sports Take.
ASU-TV, shows like Red Wolf Roundtable, ASU-TV News, Westside Football, and more. Gain real-life experience while doing what you love. Get involved with ASU-TV today.
ASU-TV, covering all your favorite sports. From Red Wolf Roundtable to Westside Football and more, ASU-TV has you covered. Tune in now to ASU-TV for news and coverage on these sports and more.
Latest segment of A-State Sports Take. I'm Jacob Wazinski, and I'm joined by my guest, Eddie Wilson and Lauren Pendleton. Our topic for this segment is NIL. Is it ruining college athletics? And it also either for the fan or for the players. And I'll ask that question in a minute. But in response to a Supreme Court in June 2021, NCAA had laws at that point for NIL and for players getting paid. State laws followed that. Since the inception, though, people have been saying that it's ruining college sports. I'll go to Eddie first. Eddie, do you agree that it's ruining college athletics, and why or why not?
I actually disagree with that assessment. I think players deserve to get NIL deals based off of their likeness, based off, obviously, their abilities. Some of these schools are profiting off of these players and their abilities and skills. And every player isn't going to be the star, but if we're talking about star players, they're generating more money and more revenue for these schools, for these programs, and bringing a whole new different type of exposure to the program, depending on, like I said, the talent and the exposure, the popularity of that certain player. So I'm actually I think players deserve to get their money, especially, like I said, if they're generating that school, more additional revenue and more TV ratings and all that stuff. It all kind of comes all together, so I'm for it. So.
And Lauren, for you, do you think that NIL is ruining it? That we are going too far with this, or do you think that do you agree with Eddie that this is just something that is just natural for a student athlete?
I mean, it is a good thing for college athletes to be getting paid for their name, image, and likeness, but it kind of ruins the culture of teams because you have a lot of one-and-done players from program to program, and it kind of ruins the whole building a culture on teams. So, for example, you come in as a freshman, you and maybe 20 other guys talking football. Y'all come in as freshmen, and only 5 of y'all actually stay when y'all could have built something from y'all came in together, but with the whole NIL thing and people just kind of focusing on the money aspect of it. Now everybody's kind of just moving around from school to school just for the money. I mean, sometimes you do have to do what you have to do, but it kind of like coaches are just bringing you here to benefit off of you, and then whatever happens after, it's like, oh, well.
Absolutely. But, college athletics, you'll have all of these fans there saying that's ruining it. Do you think it's ruining it for the fans, or do you think this is maybe an overreaction? Giving this to anybody, yeah. Oh,
do I think it's ruining it for the fans? No, I would say. I think I'm a fan. I'll put that in perspective. I'm a fan. I love basketball. whether or not the player has an NIL deal or not, I could care less. Me watching the game, it doesn't really bother me per se. Like what they have going on behind the scenes, it's just like shoot, if they come into the school and it's exciting. And like as a fan, I want to see the most exciting players, the most exciting teams, the most exciting schools or whatever. So for me, I don't think it's ruining it from a fan perspective. I think most fans, they just watch it. I don't think a lot of people just really seriously care about that too much when it comes to watching whatever it's football, basketball, soccer, or whatever, just watching the game and how it unfolds on the field, court, or whatever. So no, I don't think it's ruining the game for fans unless some of these fans just care so deeply about what the players have going on behind the scenes. But I don't believe that the average fan does. I could be wrong, but I don't believe the average fan does. So I don't think it's ruining for fans.
The same question to you, Lauren. I mean, do you think that that college fans, that this is ruining it, that this is becoming more big business than it should be, or that that's actually good?
Honestly, for the fans, I don't really think it's as deep as it is for the program or the school as a whole. Because, I mean, as a fan, you are kind of just like a spectator in a sense. So, like, you're really just rooting for the player specifically. And, I mean, if they do decide to transfer or whatever, you can still root for them without them being on your favorite team. So I would agree with Eddie on that one.
So you touched on earlier about players being one and done. I mean, now you have the transfer portal, which allows people to just kind of go wherever they want, right? Without little to no penalty. For you, again, do you think that is also ruining the team aspect of teams, or do you think that that's good that players should have a choice in where they go?
For me, I would say it's kind of both. Players do kind of I do think the transfer portal kind of bails players out. You don't have a good season one year, and instead of you actually putting in the work the next season, you just kind of like, oh well, I'm gonna go to another program that's been making all these promises, instead of actually looking at yourself in the mirror and saying, maybe I could have done X, Y, and Z better this season, instead of me pouting about the coach not playing me and whatsoever. So I do think the transfer portal does kind of cripples players in a sense. But I mean, for some players, it does kind of work out for the better. I mean, if you think about Angel Reese, she started out at Maryland. She was playing great, but she went to LSU, and in her first year, won a championship, and it came out with millions of dollars. So, I mean, it is kind of pros and cons to it, but it kind of just depends on the person.
Absolutely. And Eddie, same thing to you. I mean, with transfer portal, I mean, there's just no penalty for a player if they just want to go and leave, right? Do you think that that's good for player choice, or do you think, again, like Lauren was saying, that in a way that it provides opportunity, but it's just you don't get that team chemistry?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. Like she said, it provides opportunity for people. At the same time, you have some people who are big babies, and they're just gonna leave when they don't get their way. But there are certain circumstances where there have been stories or times or situations where a coach may not like a particular player, or they may not get along, or maybe a scandal that happened, coach gets fired. I mean, all types of different stuff. And players, they build relationships with coaches, different teammates and things, and they may not want to be in that uncomfortable situation anymore. There are some players who are rotting away on the bench who know they have the potential and talent to produce on the floor, and if the coach doesn't like them, or there's just too much talent on the team, I don't see nothing wrong with them wanting to transfer to another school, get a bigger opportunity, and be able to contribute. And then that opportunity of them transfer can lead to them, potentially going professional, getting drafted, building their draft stock and things like that. So like I said, I think it's pros and cons to it. That's the pros, but then like I said, the cons and stuff to it, you have people who are just leaving the first opportunity they get. Everything that look good ain't good. And some people realize that and find that out the hard way. And so I think that's one of the cons to it, because we all know professional athletes even, who they want out as soon as one little thing goes wrong, like the smallest inconvenience. And everything isn't going to be perfect. There's no perfect situation in life generally. So like I said, I think that's like a con to it, where people could just pout, and for people that are babies and just leave when things don't look good. One thing doesn't look good. But so I agree with it, but I'm on both sides of that.
Absolutely. And I will say, I agree that, in terms of the NIL, that it's, it's actually helpful for student athletes. And again, like you said, it's just not, it shouldn't matter to fans, right? And same with the transfer portal. I think both of you make good arguments. But I think something that does cross the line is a lot of these NIL opportunities are now become salaries, right? Texas Tech is having $25,000, for each football player that's signed up, and Utah is giving every football player a truck, right? Do you think that, that at this point it's a natural progression? I'll ask this to Eddie first. Do you think it's a natural progression for student athletes to, get salaries like a pro league? Do you think that that's something that they could do?
Salaries, I think it can become natural. But at the same time, when you talk about stuff like everyone getting cars and stuff like that, it kind of becomes more of a show almost, per se. Like then that's crossing the lines of becoming a show or whatever. But I do think it can become natural just without all the other crazy benefits and stuff. Just be on a salary and that's it. But yeah, I think it can become natural without all the other benefits and stuff like that.
Absolutely. And the same question to you, Lauren. Do you think that it's that's too far, or do you think that that's something that is just natural, that we will go into, or we should go into just salaries for players?
I think that's a bit extreme, honestly, because, we are still student athletes. We're here to get a scholarship. So, a salary is really giving the idea of why am I even going to school, So, it is a little extreme, but, if it's generating revenue for the school, do your thing. So.
Like Cardell Jones said, I'm not here to play school. He was at Ohio State, the quarterback. So that's all the time we have, though, for this segment. Thank you to my guests, Eddie Brown and Lauren Hamilton. I'm Jacob Sinski, and you're watching A-State Sports Take.
ASU-TV, shows like Red Wolf Roundtable, ASU-TV News, Westside Football, and more. Gain real-life experience while doing what you love. Get involved with ASU-TV today.
ASU-TV, covering all your favorite sports. From Red Wolf Roundtable to Westside Football and more, ASU-TV has you covered. Tune in now to ASU-TV for news and coverage on these sports and more.
Hello and welcome to this latest segment of A-State Sports Take. I'm Ty Phillips, joined by my guests Lake Maddox and Dustin Sullivan. And our topic for this segment today is, should the media be more involved in sports gambling during the game they cover? Guys, thank you for joining me. So this is a big topic. No? Yeah. There is a lot of controversy. Some people love it, some people hate it. We're just going to kind of go around the room, starting with Lake. What's your thoughts about it?
Man, it's kind of a rocky deal there, because obviously a lot of people, it's growing, it's becoming like a really big deal. Sports betting is a really big deal now. As times are changing, you kind of have to adjust to that and play into it a little bit. And obviously the discussion is whether or not media is going to be playing into this, buying into this, and making this an even bigger deal. But I'm kind of in a pinch, because at the same time, I understand, like, it's really fun. Even I'll get into a little bit of sports betting and all that. But when we start talking about having this, becoming a really big deal on the media, is when we start kind of getting into some problems, because, at the end of the day, sports gambling is a very big deal, and it can be very, obviously it can be beneficial, but it can also have some very negative effects.
I think what we run into is an ethics issue, Ty. I think when you have media personnel that have inside access to coaches, players, owners, administrators, so on and so forth, do you want them profiting over the inside access. I know ESPN as of late when they launched their new ESPN Bet, they told folks like Adam Schefter and Woj and all those guys, all the insiders, they could not be involved in using ESPN Bet or any sports betting apps because they have inside sources. They could know ahead of time, is a player going to play or not? What's their health? What's the matchups look like? What are the coaches telling them? Some coach may outwardly say, oh, yeah, we've got a great chance, but he may be telling his insiders, we don't have a chance against somebody. Then they may place a bet based on that. I mean, it's like somebody, using the stock market by talking to a stock market analyst on television. They may have inside access to what a certain stock's going to do before it actually goes out and it happens. So I think there can be certain things they could bet on. Maybe it's the sport that they're not involved in.
So you think there should be a limitation on who should bet and what, and if they can bet what?
In the media, yes.
In the media, yes.
In the media, yes.
Do you think that when during a game they're broadcasting, they should advertise more, like maybe have a bet analyst during the football game? So if you're having a football game, you have a guy talking about what, if you're betting this, what you should think about.
I mean, horse racing does it all the time. They have odds makers that, and here's the whole thing. They have odds makers that will actually place bets, but they don't have the inside source. They're not given the inside information per se on maybe, how's a particular horse doing, how's, their leg, how's their speed on this certain type of track. They just see the odds and they bet based on that. So it's an entertainment value there. I think your issue becomes actual, like you're probably saying, announcers calling games. You can mention the odds, use graphics to do so. They can mention the odds changing, throughout a game because we know they do. Mm-hmm. But I also think they can maybe pump up the players that they're announcing for if they're like a regional broadcaster. Yeah. Like if it's a Valley sports person and they want to pump up a certain player and say, hey, you need to maybe use them on your daily fantasy. That's a whole nother aspect of it as well, is the daily fantasy access, because that is part of sports gambling.
So you think there can be like a more of an outlet that as a whole, like a production crew could really get more content if they use the gambling?
Absolutely.
Like, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think obviously it might. One thing that might come of that is a lot of boost in viewership and the ratings and all that. Because if you're incorporating something as modern as sports betting into a big production, then obviously I think your ratings are going to go up. I mean, you kind of see, for example, not sports betting, but you have fantasy football. I mean, you integrate fantasy football and give people the option to kind of get more hands-on and, attached and connected to a team. Then obviously the ratings we saw with fantasy football, they go up a lot. Yeah. So I think that's a really good opportunity for some of these productions to, boost ratings by integrating and kind of come in one with the times in the sports betting. And it's a really good step for them, I think. Absolutely.
See, I think sports betting as a whole is so huge, and it's only going to get bigger as everyone's getting more involved. Like, more sports are coming up to light, more betting options, everything's going to come in. So my whole, mindset is I hope the media takes advantage of this new growth on certain sports or, certain different things and really use, that media aspect and the new technologies that are coming into play to kind of benefit off of that. Because I feel like in the betting world, you could really make a lot of money if you advertise that more, because there's a lot of people betting. There's a lot of people wanting, there's a lot of stakes in that. So advertising that more, maybe kind of getting more content base out of that could be beneficial for the publication or whatever.
I think you have the term, you don't want the rich to get richer.
Yeah.
We know the type of money that these TV personalities make. They're going to get more money if they're placing bets and they're winning and they're using that inside information. We don't want the rich to get richer. So I think there's and I think the networks have a good set of guidelines, but I think they're ever evolving because we've entered a new phase in the sports betting and sports gambling world where it's the ease of access now. Back 10, 15 years ago, you had to go find your bookie, out on the street somewhere and place your bet, hand him your cash. Now you can use an app in any state pretty much. Or you can go to any sports book place. And how sports books attract people is giving you the ability with multi-screens and it's the bells and whistles that you get to see, and that's how they end up getting your money. You don't want to see somebody like an Adam Schefter at a sports book betting and getting richer off of the inside information he knows. You want to be able to beat him.
What do you think would make it fair if like all that inside information was given out to the public? Because that would
Absolutely. And I think the NFL's probably getting that way, and maybe most professional sports are, with such things as injury reports are mandatory. You know, in the NFL, they have a certain time frame where you have to announce.
fantasy.
Yeah, you have to announce the injury reports. I think it's like maybe an hour in advance when you see the non-active list for each team for their game. Then you know, oh, yep, something's up. But even during the week, they have to publish a injury report. It says, were they limited in practice? Did they not practice at all? Fully practice. What was the injury to an extent? So at the end of the day, unless a coach or an owner or that player themselves is telling them something, they're knowing the same information we do already.
So do you think that's also going to be kind of against ethics? Because how can we trust that the people getting that insider information is going to really give us insider information?
It's up to their bosses at the end of the day. It's up to the people above them to make those decisions.
Like, you got any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, that raises a point that is an interesting topic because, you know, there's a lot of things in that world, and it can kind of get misconstrued a little bit, and people are gonna they're selfish. I mean, at the end of the day, these people are selfish. It can happen. You know, they're gonna want to make their money, and it's gonna be kind of one of those things. Can you really trust what is being told to you? Because at the end of the day, who knows? They might be with Vegas. They might just be messing you up at the end of the day.
So the rich is just trying to get richer, like
exactly.
Mr. Sullivan was saying.
Yeah,
here.
yeah. But I think what sports gambling brings in is also job opportunities in the media as
Absolutely.
well. You've got, you know, MGM, and you've got other just dedicated networks that are 24/7 sports odds, sports gambling that you can watch along with the sports that you're watching. I think us as sports people love that multi-view style. I want to watch something here. I want to watch something here. I'm going to put this in here. Maybe in the lower corner, I've got the odds showing. It's all about that.
So there's just a lot to play, and that's one thing I kind of wanted to get in is, like, there's a lot of job opportunities for people, especially if it continues to grow like it is today.
Yeah, I think, you know, there's going to be production opportunities, talent opportunities just in the sports betting world.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you guys coming out here today and talking all about, you know, sports betting and all of that.
Yep.
So thank you guys so much.
Good stuff.
That's all the time we have for this segment. Thank you, Lake Maddox and Dustin Sullivan, for joining me today. I'm Ty Phillips, and you're watching A-State Sports Take.
ASU-TV, shows like Red Wolf Roundtable, ASU-TV News, Westside Football, and more. Gain real-life experience while doing what you love. Get involved with ASU-TV today.
ASU-TV, covering all your favorite sports. From Red Wolf Roundtable to Westside Football and more, ASU-TV has you covered. Tune in now to ASU-TV for news and coverage on these sports and more.
Jackson. Our topic for this assignment is, why aren't women's sports as popular or advertised more than men's sports? And this is kind of a controversial topic, so I guess I'll go ahead and get your opinions if you agree or disagree with me on if men is more popular than women's sports.
I mean, I think it's pretty clear that men's sports
are more
popular.
Right.
You take a look at advertising for sports in general. I don't even know if I've ever seen a woman's sport being advertised on TV.
Right. Mostly, I know it's really popular with football here, and then around the world, it's soccer. But even with soccer and stuff like that, it's always men's being advertised on social media, men's being advertised on TV, stuff like that.
Exactly. I actually used to go to another college before coming to ASU. I used to go to Arkansas Northeastern College in Blytheville, and I had a friend there, and she was super into women's soccer, specifically the Women's World Cup, which I didn't even know was a thing until she told me. Of course, I had heard of the World Cup, but I've never heard of the Women's World Cup.
Right, it's not as popular.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about the football things, right? And so, of course, there is less media coverage. We can see that clearly, but sometimes we can see also a little bit. They are not doing a lot. If we see the history and till now, it's really, really less media coverage. Even like they are doing like blue chip advisors. They are trying to. We can see the latest campaign that's March Madness. They made a campaign. They were trying to even so that there is less media coverage of women's sport than men. So that also proves that there is less coverage. But again, when we see media exposure. That's I read from Purdue University. They did a research what about the airtime. So in 2019, there was like only 5.4% of airtime of women in sports. They saw on even in television, legacy media, they do that kind of things. And we see back in 1989, that's 5%, which is very, very less. It's like one-time thing. And that's done. That's like women sports has been always like that in media, kind of. So obviously there's media. They are trying to do, but they need to do more, right?
Right. And why do you think it is that men's is so much more popular or so much more advertised than it would be of like women's sports? Do you think it's just that no one really people like watching men's because I think it's maybe more intense or maybe more I don't know, just better, would you say? Or do you think it's kind of just, what do you think?
I think some of it has to do with inherent, like, gender bias in some ways. You take a look at things associated with young boys and young girls. Sports are pretty much always associated with young boys. And then that grows up into being associated with men. And oftentimes when you see stereotypical sports fans, you typically see men, you know? And sports, oftentimes from when we are children, is kind of ingrained into our heads as a mainly male thing.
Male-dominated
thing, right? Which it shouldn't be.
No, right.
Yeah, anyone can enjoy sports. I mean, you know, regardless of anything.
Right.
But another thing is, you take a look at who are often named as the greatest athletes of all time, professional athletes.
Males.
Pretty much, yeah.
Males,
Pretty much just guys. Michael Jordan, Babe Ruth, Bo Jackson.
Which there are definitely a lot of females that are high up there on the list, but like I said, they aren't as advertised as much or aren't as famous, I guess, quote unquote, than those who
There
are
is one, Serena Williams from
of course,
tennis,
Serena
right?
Williams.
Right.
That's pretty much her and Venus Williams are the only names that immediately come to mind for me. I think of all these other names like
there is like less number of women like they look up to, right? Youngster, there is very less. And even if you remember 1919 World Cup, that's a female World Cup. That's a like iconic picture if you remember. I forgot her name. I'm sorry for that. So that's like at 1919 World Cup from USA, women, she won. There were 90,000 viewers, right? So so we can count. There are only less numbers of iconic pictures for the women sport. Definitely there is like lack of media representation,
coverage,
right? So there's kind of stigma that's like you said, some kind of that injected through media. There's so only. So what happened is. I always like about the cultivation theory, like whatever you see on media, what it basically says is when you look at the same thing in regular time, that how you think. That's what theory says. So it also happens the same thing in like sporting. When you see only exposure of media coverage of male sports, only then that's how people start to only think about the male sports kind of thing. So I guess media need to work more on women exposure kind of sport.
Right, exposing more of the women's sports on media. I feel like that would also help kind of like get more audience, more viewers to the women's sports, is actually advertising and taking time to maybe lean away from the more popular men's sports and stuff like that, and kind of going more over like women's basketball, women's soccer, volleyball, all kinds of stuff like that. Because
Yeah.
I know when you turn the TV on, you immediately see men's basketball, football, men's soccer. You know, you don't ever flip on the TV, it's women's volleyball,
Yeah. But yeah, like, definitely sports are pretty much just, it's mainly a male-dominated thing. Women's sports are just not as popular, and I think that a lot of it has to do with, like I said, the gender bias, the advertising, things like that.
And what are some ways that you think that maybe women's sports could kind of get out there and be advertised more, or to maybe be,
Well, like what Tika was saying earlier, of the having more of a media focus on women's sports, put some more eyes on it through the media, through news coverage, which of course it already is covered, but
they're not doing more.
yeah, you could do more.
Yeah.
You could do more.
Yes.
I feel like this also might get some backlash from some people being like, oh, they're taking over sports and all that. And it's like, dude.
sports are for everybody.
Yeah,
So,
sports are for everybody.
Yeah,
Like,
I agree.
Who cares, It does not matter what your gender is. You can like sports. It doesn't matter at all.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I said earlier, I think a lot of this does stem from stuff that is kind of ingrained into us as children. Because I remember when I was a kid, I was, being like given sports stuff and told about sports and expected to play sports and things like that. And, well, I don't really like sports, I just liked sports back then because people kind of told me I had to. I liked the Cardinals back when I was a kid, and I couldn't tell you anything about them.
Right, and
Except
I feel like
they
a
were
lot
from
of
St. Louis.
parents sometimes maybe push, especially their male kids, to kind of grow up and be like, oh, this is what you got to do because you're a boy. Oh, you got to do this.
Yeah,
and
even
play this sport.
even like also like even my experience. Like I have 3 sisters, so from small, I'm more into like sport kind of thing, and my sister they were given with like dolls, and that's how also they do some kind of sport from small age,
That goes
and
into
that's how.
like the toys that you give your kids and stuff too when
Absolutely.
you're younger. Oh, the boys have the sports toys and everything like that, and then while the females and stuff get the dolls and stuff like that too.
Yeah. And like I said, it's something that's kind of just ingrained into us from when we are young, and it has just kind of evolved into men's sports becoming exceedingly much more popular than women's sports.
Right. Right. Well, I guess that's all the time we have for this segment. Thank you to my guests, Joe Jackson and Tika Lama, for coming on the show today. I'm Hayden Reynolds, and you're watching A-State Sports Take.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.